I was an agriculturalist, trying to get all I could for the land. But at that time, I've realized that this land is not just a resource to be used and abused. It's something that we have to take care of and look at all of it. We have to go back to the way it was if we're going to save these precious natural resources we've been given to enjoy.
Over the last several decades, we've been losing thousands and thousands of acres of our wetland habitats. Oil and gas, livestock production, agricultural producers, you name it. When you look at what the prairie used to be, you've lost all that water storage.
The river has some parts that are breathtakingly beautiful, but there are other places you want to cry because it's so dirty. And it's all the same river. Right now, we have an opportunity to take this gem, polish it off, and show it to the world.
The situation for fishing in state waters was just terrible, and we decided we were going to do something about it.
You gotta want to do it. You gotta want to be in this business. I've been going out there so long, it's just part of me now.
Here's my take. Every bend is a new adventure. It's just you and nature.
I'm kind of the steward for this land that's here. Hopefully I leave it better than the way I found it.
Well, good morning, everyone. I can't think of a better way to start the day and get us in the mindset than that lovely snippet of past conservation wranglers. As most of you know, I'm Joni Carswell. I'm the CEO at Texan by Nature, and I am so excited to see each of you in person today. It is really a joy to be able to get together and to engage in dialogue in person. And I'm excited for all of you that are joining us virtually. We have another 300 people that are joining us online this morning. So welcome to everyone. Today we'll discuss the future of conservation. We'll discuss this future through examples, lessons, and vision given across 3 panels. The 3 panels are going to dive deep on partnerships, metrics and analysis, and new models. But first, I'd like to start the day with gratitude. As I mentioned, it's a joy to see all of you in person and to be here together. But I also want to thank the folks who make this possible. I want to thank our sponsors and members. The partnership and enthusiasm that you bring to us every day of the year, not just today, enables each piece of the work that we do. I want to thank Latta Hill Philanthropies and Marathon Petroleum for underwriting our partner work. I want to thank HEB and Enbridge for supporting our Conservation Wrangler and Summit initiatives at the highest level. Phillips 66, NRG Reliant, EOG Resources, and DD Rose for continued partnership and support each and every year. Thank you to our silver and bronze sponsors as well. We are so proud to be supported by a group of diverse, committed partners from all across the state of Texas. As you see these partners today, or if you partner with them in your everyday life, please take a moment and thank them for the work that they're enabling across Texas and beyond. I'd also like to thank the Texan by Nature board members for the continued commitment to conservation and service to our organization. Laura Bush, Cynthia Pickett-Stevenson, Joe Crafton, Adair Margot, Neil Wilkins, Reagan Gammon, Tina Buford, Robert Horton, Elaine Magruder, Roxanne Newman, and Tamara Trail are all here today, and it's lovely to see you in person and have you here. And Ray Engel and Carolyn Miller, excited to have you joining virtually as well. And then finally, of course, to the Texan by Nature staff and team. I do not exaggerate when I say I am incredibly lucky to work with a group of rock stars. They make everything seamless, early, just incredibly simple to get done. So I want to thank Jenny Burden, Taylor Keys, Amy Snellgrove, Terry Pearsall, Kinsey Cherniak, Lauren Hart, Sahana Prabhu, Caitlin Tran, Elena Gale, Nicole Roy, and Anna K. Reeves. Thank you very much, guys, for taking part in our mission. So we want each of you to engage in dialogue today. This is not a summit to sit and listen. I want to turn the brain on, really think about what you're hearing, and think of good questions throughout the day. So here in the room, we'll have a microphone at the end of each panel to ask questions. We'll have someone coming around to get those questions. But online, we want you to engage as well. Please join us on our Slack channel. That is texan-by-nature.slack.com. Texan-by-nature.slack.com. If you haven't joined yet, please join us there. Or if you prefer, you can send in questions to info@texanbynature.org. So Slack or info@texanbynature.org to submit questions virtually, and we will get to the ones that we can at the end of each panel. So as we get started today, I'll share a little bit about my process. I generally spend as much of my thinking time outdoors as I can. So whenever I need to put remarks together or think about our strategy, I go on a hike, I go for a run, I do it outdoors. And as I was thinking about how to kick off this year's summit, it was incredibly windy. And I don't know if it was windy all over Texas last Friday, but in Austin, it was really, really blowing. And I was reminded of the West Texas track meets of my youth, where you round the corner and you hit this wall of wind where it just brings you up short. And you have to dig deep to make even an inch of progress. That's what it felt like last Wednesday. And it struck me that in many ways, the last 18 months have been a similar experience to many of us. We've been presented with a wall of wind in some form or fashion. We've had to dig deep. We've had to adapt to keep moving. It's been gritty, not always pleasant, but our family, friends, and teammates have been there, even if just from a distance. And it struck me in thinking about this that we are at the perfect point in time to round the corner and take advantage of the tailwind. Take advantage of the resilience that we've built, the optimism we've banked, and the hunger for partnership and progress that we've each felt. We're at the perfect point in time to take what we learned today and apply it to a rapidly changing world. We're at the perfect point in time to radically shape the future of conservation. The future of conservation, just like Texas's beautiful landscape and leadership role in industry, is ever-changing, it's ever-evolving. And as we explore new models, business metrics and strategies, and best-in-class collaborations today, our goal in being here today is to inspire new partnerships and drive conservation innovation and conservation action. It's for each of you to leave here today and partner and do something different and new and more. Our goal is to work with each of you to define and radically shape the future. This is a future where we adjust and we take advantage of tailwinds such that we care for our natural resources, our economy, and our human health in equal measures. A future where the world looks to Texas as a model of conservation. A future where we each play a role in working together towards an impact that's far greater than what we could achieve alone. So as we continue to define and evolve the definition and example of the future of conservation, I encourage you, actually I'm going to challenge you. I challenge you to engage today. How does each of the projects that are presented and were carefully selected today, how do they apply to you? How do you take their learnings, their ideas, and their innovations and utilize them in your home, in your workplace, on your land, in your community? Ask yourself the what ifs. What if I met someone new today? What if I developed a longer-term relationship? What if I looked at my own project in a new way? What if I applied a new framework or a model? What if I built on the learnings and the trials and the hunger of progress over the last 18 months and made change? We have leaders from every area of Texas, every issue in conservation, and industries across the state in the room and online today. Our future and the changes in front of us will be shaped by this team. I challenge each of you to engage with that team, to think deeply about what's shared and deeply about how you can progress that conversation and the future of conservation. So with that challenge, let's get started. Dr. McCormick, Dr. Gluesenkamp, Alexis, and Ryan, if you guys would go ahead and join me on stage. And if you haven't already, please silence your phones, or better yet, put them away if you're not engaging on the Slack channel, because we want to engage. So for each panel today, I will introduce the speakers all at one time. They'll each share their presentations in succession, and then after the final speaker, we'll have about 20 minutes of time for questions and answers. Again, if you're online, you can send questions to info@texanbynature.org, or you can go to our Slack channel, texan-by-nature.slack.com. So our first panel today is covering collaborative conservation. And collaborative conservation, as many of you who are repeat attendees, it is an ongoing theme at our summit because it is important. It's critical to what we do. Long-term success is truly dependent on collaboration. It is widely proven to achieve better results. It helps us problem solve. It brings us closer together with organizations and leaders. It brings us closer together to the community. It helps us learn from one another. It opens up new channels of communication. Collaborative conservation that spans conservation organizations, community, and industry have the same results that research shows for internal single organization collaboration. It allows us to be efficient with our time and resources and achieve bigger, broader results. Many times we see organizations, particularly in conservation, where we have over 150 organizations from small to large doing conservation in Texas, we see capacity gaps. We see some organizations strong in science, some strong in marketing, some strong in business acumen, and then, of course, industry, you see the same thing. So collaboration to us is filling those gaps. It's playing that role of a more efficient team to where we're building the capacity with one another and sharing each other's expertise towards different results. With our diversity of ecosystems, people, and industry in Texas, we have an opportunity to model what true deep collaboration looks like for the rest of the world. So today we'll hear from best-in-class examples of this, detailing landowner and community, industry, and NGO partnerships that result in big impact, from coastal restoration to international cooperation to species reintroduction to beverage production. These projects exemplify broad, far-reaching partnerships that can be replicated. During this session, we will hear from Alexis Baldera, Coastal Program Manager from Audubon, Texas, Dr. Rachel McCormick, Consul General of Canada in Dallas, Dr. Andy Gluesenkamp, Director for the Center of Conservation and Research at the San Antonio Zoo, and Ryan Campbell, the CEO at Desert Door. As a reminder, you can submit questions via our Slack channel, live in the room, or to info@texanbynature.org. Please join me in welcoming Alexis.
Hi, everybody. Hi, everybody. It's great to be here to kick off the summit today. As Joni said, my name's Alexis Baldera. I'm the Coastal Program Manager for Audubon, Texas. And we're so excited to be conservation wranglers this year for our Matagorda Bay Rookery Island Creation Project. And I really appreciate the introduction that Joni made, because it highlights some of the key points I'm going to make today. And I think you'll see that collaboration and partnership are such an important part of our work at Audubon. And so first I wanted to start by talking a little bit about what we do. So let me see here if I can get this to go. Is it the green button? Doesn't seem to be working. Yeah. there we go. Okay, so at Audubon, our mission is to protect birds in the places they need today and tomorrow. So it's a simple mission, and it's a big state, so we need a lot of partnerships and collaborations to achieve that mission. So this map here shows you some of the work that we do in Texas. These yellow stars, which hopefully you can make out, are our nature centers. We have 2 nature centers in Dallas, the Trinity River Audubon Center, the Dogwood Canyon Center, and then down in San Antonio, we have our Mitchell Lake Center. So these are kind of your classic nature centers. We can go out, see wildlife, do some hiking, participate in the amazing educational programs they have there. And down at the border, actually on the other side of the border wall, we have our Sable Palm Sanctuary, and it's a protected Sable Palm forest, one of the last remaining tracts in the United States. And then all along the Texas coast, you can't see it on this map, but I'll show you on the next picture, we have islands we manage through our coastal program. And then the purple highlighted areas on the map are actually representation of Audubon chapters. And so those are chapters that are associated with Audubon, but they work as their own separate nonprofit organizations. So we collaborate with them on a lot of different topics. And we have 5 key program areas that we work with at Audubon that align under our National Strategic Plan. So we have a bird-friendly communities strategy where in Texas, we do Bird City Texas, where we collaborate with communities and they can get certified as a Bird City Texas city. We have our working land strategy where we partner with landowners who are raising beef and they can get certified when they're practicing grassland practices that are good for cattle and good for birds. We have a coast strategy, which is a program I work on and I'll be talking about today. We have a water strategy where we protect water for people and the environment. And then we have a climate strategy where we work on creative climate solutions and do things like advocate for protecting our natural infrastructure. And as I mentioned, our coast program spans the Texas coast. So on this map, you can see these red dots. Each dot is an island that we manage. And so most of these islands we're leasing from the Texas General Land Office. And we started leasing these islands in 1923 down at Green Island and up in Galveston Bay. And we manage these islands because they're important bird rookery habitats. They're primarily colonial waterbirds nesting on these islands. And those are birds that, as you might guess, they're called colonial because they gather every year in large colonies, and they come back to the same places every year. So the birds are there from February to September, and our islands are closed. We try to stay off them. And when the birds aren't there, we're out there doing habitat management. And so you can also see there's an arrow on this map, and that arrow is pointing to Chester Island, which is the focus of most of our work in Matagorda Bay. And I'd also like to point out that if you notice, we have a lot of dots up in the Galveston Bay. We have a lot of dots starting kind of in San Antonio Bay down to the lower Laguna Madre, but there aren't as many rookery islands up in Matagorda Bay. So the project is twofold. 1, to help protect the habitat at Chester Island, and 2, to work to add new habitat in Chester Island. And we have a great partner named Coastal Bend Basin Estuaries Program who helps us manage most of the islands from San Antonio Bay down. And it's a collaboration we couldn't do this work without. So zooming in on Chester Island, here's an aerial photo of what the island looks like from a bird's eye view. And if I can get to go to the next one, there it goes. It's a 73-acre island. You can see there's a whole bunch of different types of habitat on the island. There's trees, there's marsh, there's wetland, there's beach habitat. And that variety of habitats creates opportunities for lots of different birds to nest. And you can see on this picture here what that looks like closer up. So every year we go out in May, we participate in a statewide monitoring effort. It's called the Colonial Waterbird Society. And so if you're working on birds in Texas, there's 2 weeks in May, you're probably out there counting birds. We take a drone out. We have a great volunteer named Hank Arnold who took these pictures for us, and we count the birds looking down at the tops of the trees. And so if you look at this picture, each kind of gray dot, gray blurry area is actually a nest. The white dots are birds, and if you see 2 little white dots, those are the chicks that have already hatched. And then we divide the island up into quadrants. We go out and count the birds. There's birds nesting within the trees, and there's birds nesting on the ground. And here you can see what that looks like. You can see the beach here. We have a tern colony nesting right on the sand. So terns and black skimmers are just going to scratch away a little bit of sand and lay their eggs right on the nest, right on the sand. And one of the things that's so unique about Chester Island is it has that tree habitat, it has this beach habitat, and if you notice on this picture, once you start getting into the grass, you see different birds. So you see brown pelicans. If there's a bush, you might see a laughing gull in that. And so that variety of habitat makes it a really special place, and every year we get about 20,000 pairs of birds that come to nest here, and that's across 18 different species. So there was a time in Texas's history because of overhunting, because of DDT, you didn't see see birds like pelicans, herons, and egrets on the coast. And now when you go to the coast, it would be really weird not to see a brown pelican or a great blue heron or a bird like that. And so through conservation efforts of Chester Smith and others along the Texas coast on these islands, we've been able to help rebuild those populations. And this, recently we have 2.2 million bird watchers in Texas every year, which feeds into a $1.8 billion wildlife viewing economy. So if we protect places like Chester Island, we're going to continue to have birds for those people to come to Texas and see. And it's definitely work we don't do alone. So we've done this work through a partnership with the Army Corps of Engineers since 1962. So Chester Island is actually a created island. It was built in 1962 when the Army Corps dredged the Matagorda Ship Channel. And it's a placement site. So they dredge the sediment out of the channel to build the channel. They pile it up on an island. The island kind of started out as like a bare sand habitat, which is great for those birds that love to nest on the beach. But over time, vegetation was established naturally and also through the efforts of our coastal wardens. And now we have all those wonderful trees to birds to nest on as well. And now we have Tim Wilkinson and Peggy Wilkinson who manage the island for us. That's Tim there with the gray jacket. He's working with one of the collaborators on this project. And what that looks like when you get out there, it's a big event. So because we are already a designated placement site, the Army Corps of Engineers doesn't need additional permitting or permissions to put sediment on the island. And it's great for us because you'll see the video later, which I'm excited for everybody to see. You'll see that we get a lot of erosion on the island because we're so close to the ship channel. So when the Army Corps of Engineers goes out and does maintenance dredging, they'll let us know they have 100 cubic yards of sediment coming or 200 cubic yards or whatever it is, and we can advise them on where we'd like it to go on the island. So then they'll pump it out, and you can kind of see some construction equipment down there as well, and then we'll move it around to kind of create the best type of habitat we can create for birds on the island. And here's a picture to show you exactly how close we are to the Matagorda Ship Channel. The ship channel is going there, those rectangular shapes, that's a ship channel going through Matagorda Bay. Chester Island's circled there in red, so we're right next to the ship channel. The Gulf Intercoastal Waterway goes through that kind of green highlighted area, and so we get a lot of wave energy. And one thing that we expect to happen in the next 2 years is the Matagorda Ship Channel is expected to be deepened and widened. So we're gonna get bigger ships, we're gonna get even bigger waves, and so we're gonna experience more erosion on Chester Island. But the good thing about that project is that we will get a large placement event. So we have a restoration plan right now that contemplates about 300 cubic yards of sediment. If we could get that much sediment at once, we think we could make some gains to restore the island. This project is expected to give us 2 to 4 million cubic yards of sediment, so it's a huge amount. And what we'd like to do is take advantage of that placement event to slowly start migrating the island away from the ship channel. So you can kind of see, if this is a north-south map, we'd like to place the sediment on the northern side of the island, get a restoration plan so we can make the best use of that placement event. And then hopefully we'll still be close enough to the channel to be what the Army Corps needs us to be as a placement site, but the birds will have a little bit more protection from that erosion. And the other project that we're working on in Matagorda Bay is to add new habitat to this space. And so when the BP oil spill happened in 2010, the conversation quickly changed to restoration. So how do we restore those bird populations that were impacted by the oil spill across the Gulf of Mexico, across Texas, and where do we have sites that are also very vulnerable to oil spills and chemical spills? And with our proximity to the Matagorda Ship Channel, you can see that Chester Island, if there was a spill in the Matagorda Ship Channel, in the Gulf Intercoastal Waterway, you could have impacts to those birds that are nesting on the island. So I said we have about 20,000 pairs that come back to the island every year. And when we do the count across the whole Texas coast, that's actually about 60% of the birds that are nesting in the mid-Texas coast are nesting in this one place. So what Audubon did is we convened a technical advisory committee in 2017 to try to identify some new sites where we could build additional habitat and redundancy into this system. So here's our technical advisory committee here. We got state and federal agencies, we have nonprofit partners, we have a university, and we have Calhoun Port Authority. So all this technical expertise went into this project to help us think about what are the kind of factors we need if we're gonna build some successful new habitat in the Bay. And we came up with 5 new sites. Since then, we finished the report, and we have permits in hand for 2 of these projects through a grant with the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation. And we currently have a grant from the Texas General Land Office Coastal Management Program to do some additional modeling around the mouth of Cronquerol Bay and hopefully get a permit for that site as well. And if we can get those permits in hand and continue that work, we're also applying for funding to get these projects built. So they can be quite expensive to build a new island. If we can get some beneficial use like we do at Chester Island, we can reduce the cost of those projects, and hopefully we'll have some more resilient, redundant habitat within Matagorda Bay. And one thing I'd like to point out on the map is you can kind of see, if you can see Espiritu Santo kind of on the south, and East Matagorda Bay kind of further north, you have some land barriers built in. So if you did have a spill or a catastrophic event, you'd have some protection between the older islands and the new islands. So our partners are important for us, not just to help us with technical expertise and to help us identify these new island sites, but they come out with us, they help us do monitoring. With the last couple years with coronavirus, we actually haven't been able to engage as many community members as we usually do. So Texas Parks and Wildlife has really helped us with our monitoring on the island. They have their staff participate in our annual monitoring count. This is our happy crew this year. It's always a good day to get out to Chester Island, and this is after the monitoring. You can see Romy Swanson there in the blue in the middle. He's our Director of Conservation Strategy. But we have Texas Parks and Wildlife. We have contractors from Freese and Nichols who will donate their time. And then we also have volunteers who've been working with us since Chester Smith was the warden and now continued with Tim and Peggy Wilkinson. So there's a few needs for this project moving forward. A couple things I've already mentioned. So of course we need construction to actually, money to actually do the construction on these islands. We've applied for funding from a few different sources, and they're big ticket items, so I think it's gonna be a partnership. It's gonna be a few different groups working on that. We're also looking to update our restoration plan, so when we get that big placement event on Chester Island, we can take advantage of it and really do some good work for the birds. We're always interested in engaging with communities. So these projects have benefits to communities that are nearby the islands. The islands can do ecosystem services like nutrient filtering. They're storing carbon in their salt marshes. And they're even thought to create some buffer from storm surge and waves during hurricanes, because they can kind of slow down some of that wave energy. So we want to get out there with communities. We want to talk about these projects and how they might positively benefit communities. But we also want individuals to come out and join us and go birding with us. We have our annual Christmas bird count coming up in December. It's the first 2 weeks before and then the first 2 weeks after Christmas. And it's a great way to get out and bird. You can be a new birder, you can be an experienced birder, and it's all volunteers. And we often have private landowners who will open up their land for us so volunteers can get out and do those counts. There's also lots of bird festivals that aren't Audubon events, but we'll be at those, so come check us out. And then again, we're looking for community partnerships. So partnerships through Audubon Conservation Ranching or Bird City, Texas, or even if you have birds nesting on your land and you want to learn more about them or have some monitoring or talk about how to improve that habitat, we're happy to do that. And then last but not least, if you want to volunteer, you can reach out to us. We always need volunteers to help us with cleanups, with putting up signs, with monitoring on our islands all along the Texas coast. So I put my contact information here. You can reach out to me. That's my email address. We're also Audubon Texas or Audubon TX on all the platforms, so you can find us there. And so thanks everybody for the time today. Thanks for your attention. And look us up. We'll be here all day, and hopefully you can come birding with us. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Rachel McCormick, and I am Canada's Consul General to the South Central United States, and I want to thank Mrs. Bush, the Board of Directors, all of the staff at Texan by Nature for all the work that went into today, as well as all of the partners and collaborators that really advance the objectives of Texan by Nature. As a Consul General, I don't know how many of you have worked with us before, but I'm neither a consul as a lawyer or a general, so the name really doesn't make that much sense, but we have ambassadors in capitals and we have consuls generals in the regions with countries that we have significant relationships with. And of course, Texas and Canada are very highly linked. We may seem far away, but we're really close. When I drive across Texas, it looks just like my home province of Saskatchewan, with pump jacks going, big fields, ranches, agriculture. We are very similar. we in Canada actually welcome over $23 billion of your goods and services every year. And a lot of that is in the energy sector. You have Enbridge, which is a fantastic Canadian company bringing energy products across the country, our countries, but also to Texas. But we also collaborate a lot on environment and conservation issues. And so today I'm going to take the chance to talk a little bit about what we're doing in Canada in terms of collaborative conservation, but then really dig into some ways that we're connected to show how our work together actually delivers really important results. So right now, we have a goal in Canada of reaching 30% conservation of spaces by 2030. There's lots of different ways we're doing that, and there's different types of conservation efforts, just like here in Texas. So we have things like habitat joint ventures, where we work with corporations, non-governmental organizations, as well as other levels of government. We focus on priority areas for bird and waterfowl. We have 55 national wildlife areas. Those are on federal grounds, but we also work with partners in those capacities as well. We have 92 migratory bird sanctuaries, which have protected 11.5 million hectares, and we have 48 national parks. We have 39 regions within Canada, and we have 7 left to build national parks and urban parks in to make sure we have all of our species and spaces protected. We've really moved away from a species-specific, single-species approach to conservation to thinking about multi-species, protecting spaces, and an ecosystem-based approach. Part of that is really working with companies, industry, but also as well as with our First Nations. And so that's one of the areas of collaboration I just wanted to highlight a little bit today. I think I skipped back. I don't know if somebody can skip it the other way, or I can. There we go. Oh. So Canada has a commitment to work with our Indigenous communities, and we understand how important conservation is to our First Nations. They are able to, through Indigenous protected conservation areas, determine the objectives, the boundaries, the management plan, as well as the governance structure for protecting that land. The idea is to advance a multi-generational view of stewardship with recognition to the fact that their relationship with the land has gone for centuries and will continue for centuries. In our Indigenous Guardians pilot program that we have right now, we have already established many efforts. And this is a way to actually allow Indigenous rights and responsibilities to be advanced through conserving ecosystems and also developing sustainable economies. So it's really that intersection of business, conservation, and culture. And it's a very important part of our work for reconciliation with our Indigenous peoples in Canada. So the types of things that we fund through those partnerships are research, surveys, gathering traditional knowledge, improving habitat, and capacity building and education. So I just wanted to profile that as something that I think is a really innovative approach to collaboration that we're advancing in Canada. I want to jump now into sort of how we collaborate with the United States in general on conservation, environment, etc. I don't know where I'm supposed to point. There we go. So I'm going to talk a lot about birds today. So the protection of migratory birds. We also have an international joint commission and a boundary waters treaty. Those are both 100-year-old treaty agreements. We knew 100 years ago that our water and our species would not survive without each other. 43% of our border is actually water. We have 20% of the world's fresh water shared between us. So we have to work together. I'll talk a little bit more later about the fact that our birds spend a lot of time down here. We talk about the original snowbirds. Very happy that the border is open. My mother-in-law is driving down right now with her golf clubs and her coffee maker, and she is very excited to not be in Canada for the winter this year. We also work on things like butterflies, bats, caribou, and we have something called the North American Commission for Environmental Cooperation. I mentioned before the significance of trade in North America. So this commission was actually established at the same time as the trade agreement, the NAFTA. So it was a side agreement that said that we were going to work together to conserve our species and spaces and work together to solve problems that we were facing. We knew that we were jointly connected by air, by our birds, our mammals, our fish, and that we needed to work together to conserve them. And so it's really a good indication of how long we've recognized that our economy and our environment, working with industry and government together, is important for achieving results both for the economy and the environment. So, as I said, the original snowbirds, 78% of our bird species spend at least half of the year outside of Canada. That's important. It's important for us to work with y'all. See, I'm getting it, y'all. Haven't started the all y'all, but I'm getting there. Half of the year outside of Canada. So what you all do down here to conserve bird species is really important for us, but what we do is really important for you. This space on the map is called the Prairie pothole region. We call ourselves the duck factory of the North. And when I worked at our embassy in Washington, D.C. for 5 years before coming to Dallas, and I headed the energy and environment section there. So I was really the core of our bilateral relationship on everything relating to pipelines, birds, water, everything. And every year we would have an event with Ducks Unlimited in the United States and Ducks Unlimited in Canada. And it was one of the most significantly attended events by cabinet members, no matter the administration in place. Because I think a lot of people, it's a very tangible thing that these birds, these waterfowl, are born in the Prairie pothole region. And if that region is not conserved and those spaces are not protected, they can't fly down here. So they can't spend that winter down here. And I think it's a very good demonstration of how we work together. And so it's not just working together, it's actually financial flows. And so I don't know if all of you know this, but in 1989, there was actually a North American Waterfowl Conservation Act that was established. And so your Congress actually appropriates about $15 million annually to protect waterfowl. And half of that goes outside of the United States, but it's matched. And it's matched by industry partners, it's matched by provincial governments, it's matched by the Canadian government, and it has had significant results for waterfowl in North America, and we'll talk about that. Ducks Unlimited has been very integral to matching and multiplying that impact. So since that time, we've had 3,100 projects, $1.9 billion in grants, and $4 billion in matching. And that means 31.5 million acres of habitat for waterfowl breeding grounds has been protected up there. So here's just two examples of waterfowl that you would see down here. And the red pinkish color is where the babies get born. So it really talks about why we are that duck factory of the North and how we are connected and how if we do not conserve our wetlands and our spaces, those ducks are impacted directly. And what y'all do is really important for what they do in the winter when they luckily escape the minus 30 and minus 40 degrees that are up there. So this is just an example of what's happened. If you look at this, you can see the difference that's happened in terms of wetlands compared to other areas as a result of this collaboration that we have, and how significant this has been in terms of both the funding, the collaboration, the projects, the space that's been conserved, but also the species that have been restored. So 35 million waterfowl gained since 1970 as a result of this collaboration. I want to dig into one specific species because I think it's really a great demonstration. So again, the breeding grounds for the whooping crane. Wood Buffalo National Park is about 17,000 square miles large. It's about the size of 2/3 of the Texas Panhandle. So they have been cooperating with Aransas National Wild Refuge on the Gulf Coast. And they've gone from 20 remaining whooping cranes in the 1940s to over 500 at the last count. So this is a really concrete demonstration of how northern Alberta and southern Texas work together to actually save a species. And I think this is really, really important. And I know the San Antonio Zoo has a role in the whooping crane conservation as well. Audubon as well does too. And I have to say, if you haven't gone to the Trinity River location for Audubon, it's fantastic. Every place my husband and I get posted, we start a Girl Scout troop. And we have really enjoyed bringing Girl Scouts to your location and helping them learn about the importance of working in conserving and taking action themselves, and really building that next generation of people that contribute back and understand how their day-to-day impacts impact the world. The last thing I want to talk about is butterflies. I talked about the NAFTA. So the NAFTA was signed in San Antonio, and the image for the North American Commission for Environmental Cooperation, that side agreement for the environment, is the monarch butterfly. It's that image up in the top right-hand corner. And part of the reason for that is that the monarch requires all of us to survive, all 3 of our countries. So there's the migratory route for them. And you know, it's not just for their survival that they need us, but we also need them. Texas exports $1 billion in agricultural products to Canada a year, and you import $1 billion of agricultural products a year. It's almost perfectly balanced. We know that there are pollinator collapses that are happening, but we also know that we can work together to build those spaces for pollination that are so important. It's not just important for them, the species, but it's also important for food security in North America. It's important for our economies, and I think that integration and that two-way benefit of our efforts from industry and conservation is important. That bench there that's highlighted is a bench that talks about a North American friendship. And it's from a pollinator garden that we installed at Confluence Park in San Antonio. And so it's just a really good recognition of how we are all connected through flyways, whether it's for birds or butterflies. We've done actually a similar garden in Austin, and we'd love to partner with folks here in Dallas to do something similar. But I think it's just a really good on-the-ground demonstration of the importance of our connections for the environment, for species, but also for our economy. I always say that the butterflies, as they carry that pollination, are sort of the original long-haul truckers that go down the 95 from Canada to Texas, and they're carrying something that's important for all of us. And so I think they're just a great image for our cooperation together and how conservation really depends on all of us working together, not just within subnational boundaries, but across international boundaries. Thanks very much, and I look forward to talking further.
Good morning. I'm Dr. Andy Gluesenkamp. I'm Director of Conservation in San Antonio Zoo's Center for Conservation and Research. Really happy to be here talking about our horned lizard project today. It's one of many projects that we work on at the zoo. There's no sort of single model for the type of work that we do. I like to try and keep as big a toolbox as possible so that we can put the right tools at the right problems. And you'll see some examples of that during my talk today. So I'm just curious, how many of you have seen a Texas horned lizard in the wild? All right, that's great. So those of you who raised your hands, you know that there are far more individuals who have not. And probably your kids or grandchildren, they might not believe you, that used to go around and pick up a bucket full of them in the backyard after school every day. It sounds crazy. I've heard those stories about 7,000 times, so I suspect it's true. And that's a huge part of why we started the Horned Lizard Reintroduction Project. So I'll just say flat out, this thing is not even close to being at risk of extinction. It's state listed as threatened, which means don't eat them or sell them. But that legal status, that regulatory status for the species really isn't all that important in comparison to how much Texans love this organism. So like I said, it's beloved. I don't know anyone that doesn't like horned lizards. It's iconic, right? This is a really approachable image of the West that's instantly recognizable. And they used to be really abundant. You know, those of you that raised your hands, you probably saw lots of horned lizards when you saw them. I'm guessing, and you can catch me later and tell me your personal stories, but I'm guessing most of you I could usually guess the president who was in office the last time you saw a horned lizard, depending on where you live. If this is a Dallas crowd, then I'm guessing Reagan was president the last time you saw a horned lizard. Well, they started to decline in the 1950s and really blinked out in a lot of areas by the late 80s. So Austin area, we used to have lots of horned lizards in South Austin. Where would you put a horned lizard now? In the parking lot at Bed Bath & Beyond? No. But it's not all doom and gloom, and that's another reason why I'm so proud of this project, because working in conservation, and those of you who have televisions at home or read, you see conservation stories all the time that they're sad. It's not getting better. And we all know that eventually we kind of tend to tune out things that make us feel bad. I hope, bear with me, this project is one that should make you feel good. And a lot of conservation work really does have a bright and happy ending. That potential is in the future. We really need to focus on that because nobody wants to work on a lost cause. Okay, so we all love them. They're doing okay, but they're a really great representation for sort of things that need our help just a little bit. I finally decided to come clean, and I just call them a Trojan horse. So the horned lizard is my Trojan horse. In fact, we have that giant horned lizard at the zoo. It's pretty cool. Because everybody likes them. I don't need to argue with the landowner about why they should care about horned lizards. They know. It's different with other species I work on, like tiny blind spiders that live in caves. That's a tough sell. Horned lizards aren't. And people are extremely enthusiastic about bringing horned lizards back to show their grandchildren or for other people, their neighbors, to have the same experiences that they had. And so in managing for horned lizards, it's very simple. It's managing for native biodiversity on a landscape level, right? Horned lizards aren't super special or difficult compared to all the other things that live in that community. And one way to sort of get through to folks that might not be familiar with horned lizard ecology, I'm sure there are a couple in this room that don't know a lot about horned lizard ecology, but you probably know a bit about quail ecology. And there you go. That's all you need to know. Right? They like the same kind of habitat. So when I talk to people about, well, look, you could be managing for horned lizards. Well, we're really focused on quail. Okay, you're managing for horned lizards. They like the same habitat. So it's an easy sell. And why do I care? Why do I need a Trojan horse? Well, I don't need to tell you why we need to value conservation, but this is a really important tool out of that big toolbox to encourage voluntary conservation efforts on the private landowners on a large scale. That little white blind spider ain't gonna do it. I love them. Oops, sorry. There we go. So what are we doing about that? We're gonna bring lizards back to places where they've disappeared in recent decades. And it's a bit of a tall order because it requires that whole build it and they will come. Some of the properties that we've looked at, they're great, they're ready to go. The vast majority of sites that we've looked at as potential reintroduction areas, they need a little bit of tweaking, either some prescribed fire or brush management, encouraging native forbs and grasses, controlling mesocarnivores or invasive species like fire ants and hogs. Once again, those are kind of standard tools that we use in conservation. It's not some magic horned lizard recipe. But that's what we're doing, is providing that advice and guidance to landowners, working with others, our partners at Texas Parks and Wildlife. I try to defer to them for landscape management because I'm a zoologist, not a landscape biologist. And the strategy is to produce large numbers of horned lizards and, importantly, to produce protocols that can be shared with others, modified, replicated. We're a very small program. I have 4 staff, and we have several other large projects that we're working on. We never imagined that we would be able to meet the demand for horned lizards with our efforts. However, we've got a great team, really good resources. We're in San Antonio, which is an awfully good place to work on horned lizards. And so we're in the perfect position to really work on developing these methodologies, both for producing horned lizards, for managing horned lizards, for conducting reintroductions of horned lizards, and hopefully establishing viable horned lizard populations that will spread to other places, right? We're not trying to make dots on a map. We're trying to seed the landscape with horned lizards again. And there's no manual for doing this. So every step of every process, it's a step in the dark. And we're constantly adapting what we do so that we can fine tune it to work with for our lizards. Critical to this effort is broad collaboration. I honestly don't have time in this talk to even list by name all of the collaborators and partners who have joined us in this effort. Other zoos, state agencies, but really, really importantly, private landowners and individuals who are passionate about advocating for horned lizards and biodiversity in general. And I wanted to share this photo because it captures most of those components. The individual on the right is Matt Winkler. He owns the ranch where we have our first release site, where we've been conducting horned lizard releases for the last year. And that through his generosity in providing access to his ranch and managing it, that's given us, literally a foothold on getting horned lizards back on the landscape. The individual holding the phone is a master naturalist member she's not texting. She's actually looking at a map that we developed that has a GPS point for every harvester ant mound in our release area. So we're able to use this map to go to specific harvester ant mounds and look at the horned lizards, look for the horned lizards that we put there. And then the other two individuals in that photo on the left side, that's Paul Bunker. He's president of Chiron Canine. He is a conservation dog trainer who reached out to us once he heard about the project. And since then, we've been collaborating on developing a network of dogs and their owners who are trained to detect horned lizards. So I'll talk a bit more about that later. So here's an individual who actually runs a business that does this thing that we need and has been super generous in donating his time and expertise because he gets it. He's passionate about it. And not a native Texan. He's actually British. So you don't have to have those childhood memories of horned lizards to love them. So there we have the low-tech approach and the high-tech approach. Collaboration, generosity of landowners, all in one single iPhone photo. In addition, we do have some corporate partners on this. It's been great working with Toyota Motor Manufacturing of Texas. They're one of our earliest supporters of this project. They're working on restoring part of their 1,700-acre campus to be nice, diverse native habitat that hopefully will include horned lizards once they get their acreage up. It's going to be a beautiful thing and visible from space, which is kind of cool. So our corporate partners are just as excited about this effort as the kids who come and tour the zoo. Like, everybody loves them. And this overlap photo here, it shows members of our Texas Horned Lizard Canine Detection Team. So these are dogs who have demonstrated the appropriate aptitude for finding lizards and their human friends. And both human and dogs form teams that are trained over a period of, it can actually happen in about 45 days. About 4 or 5 days to 2 months of training from zero to deployable. This is super important because, one, they're volunteers and dogs don't charge a rate. So this is really good for a tiny program. Also, we're not putting all our eggs in one basket with one single person and a dog, and that's failed in many other efforts historically because people get divorced or they go back to grad school and the project ends. So here we have a network, a phone tree of volunteers who we can call on and hopefully not burn out any one individual. As important as collaboration is, I think using these traditional but not frequently employed techniques like dogs to detect lizards is really important. So yeah, it's cheaper. And I've got a bunch of detectors here. We're still growing this volunteer network. I don't need to tell you that dogs are good at finding things, but also it's minimally invasive, right? Nothing happens to the lizard. It gets sniffed at and the dog sits next to it versus other techniques are used now, which include RFID strips, little radio backpacks, and those are fine. But if I'm releasing 100 lizards at a time that are this big, I can't put a radio backpack on them. And I couldn't afford the backpacks in the first place or the technician time to go find the lizards on the landscape. So God bless dogs. Oh, I'll also point out that human volunteers, like this individual in the middle of that photo, he really wanted to be on the team, but he didn't have a dog. And so that's okay. We thought of this when we developed the network. Paul will source an appropriate dog from a shelter and place it with a volunteer who provides a forever home. So, get ready. We're saving dogs to help save lizards. That one gets me. Other partners include Freetail Brewing, so they have their Conservesa beer where they showcase an endangered species on the can, and they raise money to go to the conservation for that species. It's highly stylized. Suffice to say, that's a Texas horned lizard, so run out there and drink that Freetail beer. It's pretty good. And I just wanted to show an example of what the dogs do in the wild, right? It's what your dog does when you go for a walk. They find poo and they sniff it. And this is Gren. She's our first pilot dog. So we started with one dog in person and went through the whole process to make sure that it was going to work, and now we're blowing it up. So there she is. Just really quickly, some numbers. So our initial release area, it's that green blob at the top of the map. That's about 270 acres. It's been under active conservation management for over 15 years, which is great. And we are actually doing focus management in that area to benefit harvester ants and horned lizards. So prescribed fire, going out and treating fire ant mounds with steam, so we don't hurt the ants. The ranch itself is 2,000 acres. And there are 6 county parks, private nature preserves, et cetera, within a very short distance of this ranch. And what separates them is other large privately owned ranches that are primarily these non-traditional landowners, who I truly feel are our salvation in Texas now, because they're increasing in number, and they have very different perception about what's valuable about that land versus the farmers and ranchers of old who were forced to wring every nickel they could out of every acre. 325 lizards, if everything goes right, that's how many lizards we're going to be releasing per site over a period of 3 to 5 years. And if you look at this slide, those individual wild-caught lizards, they're really diverse. So we need to color match our lizards with the soil at the release site, which means we need to keep a really large breeding colony, and they need to work hard. And here's how we do it. So currently the lab has about 50 breeding individuals. We're working towards expanding that so we have about 200 breeding individuals in the population. And same thing with juveniles. So here's a clutch of hatchlings. We're at a capacity to produce up to 200 babies per year. We'd really like to make that 1,000. With that, we could be operating 3 separate releases at different sites simultaneously. We've already released 107 lizards on this site, and as of Saturday, we found one with the help of 60 Boy Scouts. And so what do we need? The acute need right now is to complete construction of these labs. So you can see these shipping container labs. We've installed them, we painted them, there are doors cut, there aren't stairs even to get up to them. So we're still fundraising to finish this infrastructure that will then allow us to quadruple our capacity. And the beauty of shipping containers is that if we want to keep going, we just keep stacking them. And really the chronic issue is that this project is entirely supported by grants and donations. So we spend a ridiculous amount of time trying to keep that thing floating. I'm just gonna tell you all now, what I really need is an endowment to support this effort so that we can focus our time on actually doing this work to benefit native biodiversity. What else can you do? Become a horned lizard advocate, visit your zoos, visit local parks, talk to your neighbors about the shared resource that you have, right? Horned lizards don't care about fences, neither do most other things. And there are a lot of ways that you can get involved that suit different individuals. And I'd like to direct you to these two websites, the Zoo's conservation page and Texas by Nature's page about this project, and you can learn a lot more. The Zoo page, if you're curious about some of the other work we do, there are brief descriptions of a bunch of the other conservation projects that we're working on. Thanks. Sorry, it's Halloween-ish time.
Thank you very much. Appreciate the opportunity to come and speak to y'all today. Mrs. Bush, when I call my mother tonight and tell her I spoke in front of you, I promise you it will be the best day of her life, bar none. So, wanted to talk to you guys a little bit about this culture of conservation that we've built in this company called Desert Door. So it's a company started by me and two other guys. We're actually all former military, and we met at the University of Texas. And this was actually our class project. We got an A on it. And the entire company was founded upon one simple question. And that question has had this dramatic impact and effect on the culture of our company and has driven us to be a company that is hyper-focused on conservation. And that simple question is, how do you make a liquor from a plant nobody wants? So this picture is a great allegory of West Texas. Wide open spaces, nothing to be seen, but in the forefront is a plant that speaks most to the history, the landscape, and the people of West Texas. So this is the sotol plant. This is the plant we actually make our liquor from, and it grows wild out in West Texas. If you go out to West Texas today, there are actually cave drawings of this plant. Natives used it as a plant to sustenance, to live and survive for 10,000 years. They would make baskets from its leaves. They would make weapons from its stalks. They would also cook it and eat it. And about 1,000 years ago, they figured out, after cooking it, if they put it in these holes in the ground, and they actually mash it up and add water to it and come back a couple days later and drink the water, they would get drunk. So it is actually the first known fermented beverage or beer ever consumed in North America was made using the sotol plant right here in Texas. 300 years ago, the Spanish show up, teach them how to distill it, and it was all lost to history due to prohibition and other government regulations, and we're bringing it back. So when we began this, we knew that these plants existed out in the wild, and we wanted to basically develop a process that would make it so we never had to farm this plant forever. So we sat down to develop that process. So what we do is we cut all the leaves off of the plant and we harvest it right above the root system, so the plant actually grows right back. We only harvest about 20% of the plants per acre at any given time, and we will only harvest an acre about once every 12 years. We follow this process to the T, and we're already seeing plants growing back. Once we've actually harvested the plant, This is what it looks like. This is actually a small version of it, but we take it to our distillery in Driftwood, Texas, where we cook it under high pressure and steam, and then we squeeze the heck out of the plant, and this juice comes out. That juice we ferment, and then we ultimately distill it out and make a super high quality spirit with it. But there's a leftover plant material as well. Currently what we do is we take that leftover plant material, and we take it back out to West Texas where we mix it up with cottonseed and molasses, and we feed it to the animals that graze on the property. And they actually fertilize the regrowth of the plant. So at this point, we've developed a process and we've developed a product that is beyond sustainable. Because the thing is, if you go out to somewhere we were at, say 3 years ago, it would look like we were never there, okay? We didn't plant the plant, we didn't water it, we didn't fertilize it, there's no insecticides, no pesticides, yet we took about 4 bottles of liquor out of the, 4 bottles of liquor per plant that we harvested out of the ground, and it would look like we hadn't touched it at all. So with that being said, we then started to ask ourselves, how could we then take the liquor and put it in something that people could reuse? This is our 200 milliliter flask. For most liquor companies, this is a product that they anticipate customers will buy and throw away. For us, this is actually made out of 304 stainless steel. It's something that you're supposed to buy once and reuse the rest of your life. You can take it hunting, you can take it fishing, you can take it rock climbing. In fact, we drive the point home so much that it actually comes with a carabiner on it. We've done that with all of our packaging. The bottle you saw in the beginning is actually a ceramic bottle. It comes with a swing top lid. It's intended to be reused for multiple purposes. In fact, if you bring it to us in our distillery, we will exchange it out for a full bottle. You have to pay for the new one, but we also will give you a free cocktail. It's a pretty good deal, right? So the thing is as we started making these decisions, what became interesting is we started attracting people who were equally interested in these types of things. We have a company filled with people who are passionate about conservation. They're passionate about working at Desert Door because of the things that we do. We've also attracted other partners, people like the East Foundation that we're working with, or Texas Parks and Wildlife, or SELA, and on the list goes. And we've created this incredible community of people that are all focused around conservation. So then we started to say, well, how can we hang out a little bit more together? So we went and we started doing conservation projects as a company. We funded, our first one was a prescribed burn out in West Texas where we set 1,000 acres on fire as part of a grasslands restoration. And again, we started to ask more questions, like, what can we do with all these burned sotol plants? And so we made a liquor out of it. We call it Backburn. Now, we only made it once. We'll only do it once, but it was the first in what we call our conservation series. This is our bottle here. Outside feels like earthenware, sandpaper-ish. Okay, and the bottom is actually a raised topography map of Big Bend. These things started entering into our consciousness in ways that we didn't actually plan. We didn't sit down and say, what conservation thing can we do today? It started becoming a part of who we were. So we did more projects and more, and our community has continued to grow. This was a cedar removal project that we did down in Wimberley, Texas this last year. The entire company shut down, and we went out and as a team we're removing cedar. And we came back and we actually harvested the juniper berries on it. We have a habit of wanting to make liquor out of stuff. I'm sorry, guys, okay? But we made a botanically infused sotol out of it, okay? And as this has continued to grow and grow and grow, we found, as part of our conservation series, our original commitment was that we were going to donate a portion of the proceeds from every bottle to a conservation organization. And we just found that there wasn't one who thought about it and cared about it the way we did. Not to say there's not a lot of great organizations, but this became very personal for us. So we founded our own 501c3. It's called Wild Spirit, Wild Places. Our CEO, Dr. Karen Luby, is actually here with me today. And it's committed to the preservation of rangelands and ranchlands and the way of life of West Texas. We just frequently say we want to keep wild places wild. And so in that same vein, Desert Door has undertaken multitudes of different conservation projects, but we don't think or talk about them that way. We actually have our own beekeeper. We have bees on multiple ranches around the state, and her job is to go around and tend to them. We do mentored hunts with Texas Parks and Wildlife because we're trying to breed the next generation of conservation-minded hunters. We're doing projects with people like East Foundation to highlight what true cowboy lifestyle is like. We're doing tons and tons of things, and it's interesting because it's become a part of our consciousness. It's no longer just a question that we ask, but it really is interesting because it all started with one simple question, which is, how do you make a liquor from a plant that nobody wants? Thank you.
Thank you to each of our speakers. Fantastic presentations. So we have about 20 minutes now for Q&A. So if you would, we'll have some Texan by Nature staff members with microphones. If you have a question in the room, if you would raise your hand and we'll get to you as quickly as we can. And if you are joining us virtually, you can submit via our Slack channel or to info@texanbynature.org. So any questions to kick us off? We have one down here in the front, Jenny. Or Reagan, do you want to?
I can talk really loud. Alexis, on the islands, all the areas that you're restoring, is there much plastic waste that comes onto those islands from the Gulf?
Yes, yeah, and the question, if you couldn't hear in the back, was do we get a lot of plastic waste on the islands we manage? And the answer is yes, we get a lot of debris washing up on our shores. And it depends on where you are in the coast. Sometimes you have kind of places where the trash will aggregate more, but during the winter we spend a lot of time going out and removing that debris, and we're actually planning a couple of volunteer events in Galveston for December to get out and try to get some of that stuff off the islands because it can interfere with the birds in the nesting.
Alexis, how do people find out about those volunteer events to come help you out?
Yeah, they can check out our website, and we'll have it on our events page on our website. We haven't set the dates yet, so they're not there yet, but they will be there soon.
Thank you.
Right here, Joe.
For the horned lizard reintroduction, what is in your toolbox to get rid of fire ants and pigs?
Well, I think you know how we get rid of pigs. Standard removal practices. The fire ants is really a tricky one, and unfortunately, I spent several years long ago working for a consulting company where basically all I did was murder fire ants around endangered species caves. It's really that was very challenging, the same way it is challenging here. You can't use Amdro or any toxic material to treat your ants because they're not species specific, and you will impact your native ants, your good ants, at least as much as the fire ants. So fire ants, you all know, they pop up like mushrooms after a rain. Those harvester ant beds, right, they call them red ants, and they make the big gravel apron around their nests, and they harvest seeds and things. That nest has one queen. She might live 20 years. If you dump gas on it or they go out and get some Amdro on accident, it's gone. So I want all of you to flip the way you look at harvester ant mounds. Think of them as low-lying oak trees. They're extremely important for that habitat. And we wouldn't think of just like poisoning or hacking down a random live oak on our property. Same thing with harvester ants. So what do I use for fire ants? Steam, hot water. The old-fashioned way we do it is a turkey fryer, a bunch of galvanized buckets, and picks, and go out there and basically boil and dig and boil and dig. That's terrible work. So I designed a system, and there are other ones in use to this date. In fact, I bought back one of the systems I designed years ago for this project, which is a trailer-mounted portable hot water pressure washer. I put a 40-inch custom-made stainless steel wand on it, and it's like laser surgery for ants. So it's extremely specific. I'm injecting 3,000 PSI of boiling hot water at 4 gallons a minute into that ant mound and none other. And it works great. In fact, excuse me, I was on our release site Saturday, and I literally did not see a single fire ant. May and June of last year, I treated around something like 150 harvester ant mounds. I probably treated about 3,000 fire ant mounds. So dramatic difference. And I lost 20 pounds. You could do it at home. Why do it at home? Hottest water I can get out of the tap, a drop of dish soap, and just dig it into the mound. Keep in mind, you're not trying to get them clean. The dish soap is just to break the surface tension, the soil, and to deal with that annoying habit that you can't drown them because they hold air against the hairs on their cuticle. But man, you add a little dish soap to that water, it breaks the surface tension, and the little fire ants drown.
Have you partnered much with TCU on this?
From the very beginning. So Dean Williams at TCU, he is a horned lizard geneticist. We've been collaborating with Dean from the beginning of this project. In fact, I worked with Dean quite closely for years when I was the state reptile and amphibian biologist for Parks and Wildlife. In fact, it is Dr. Williams' work at TCU that basically opened the door for all of the horned lizard reintroduction programs that are going on right now. Fort Worth and Dallas zoos also have programs, and that's because Parks and Wildlife funded him to do a statewide genetic analysis of the species, and he basically found that there are 3 groups in the state, but within those regions, you can shift individuals around and not mess up the population structure. So that was sort of the thing that started horned lizard reintroductions, because those of us who were queued up to do it finally had the green light. We knew that we could breed lizards from different places and turn them loose somewhere else and not hurt lizards that are already in the wild. Go horned frogs.
Hi, this is Sarah. I've got a question for Desert Door. Thank you for your effort to make everything into a liquor. I wondered whether you had any thoughts or approaches to water supply as it relates to your overall production line.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's, so, you know, sometimes there's been like happy accidents and stuff like that. When we first built our distillery, the fire chief required that we put in 30,000 gallon water tank because there wasn't a fire hydrant within a quarter mile of it. I'm so angry. If you've ever started a business, there's hidden costs. This was a very large hidden cost. And what's amazing is that kind of idea of like, how can we conserve things? What we did is we actually converted that into our cooling system for our entire plant. So we save on average about 10 to 20,000 gallons a week now in wastewater. There's a lot of cooling water that's necessary in order to convert steam back into a liquor again. And then we also are very attentive to the actual water supply that we used to put in our liquor. We take stuff right out of the aquifer on a well. But we filter it really, really good to put it in. But water is always kind of an issue for distilleries, for breweries, and that kind of stuff. And thankfully, this fire chief knew better than I did at the time and has created where we like are probably the lowest water using distillery in the state. It's crazy.
Dr. McCormick, I had a question about ducks in Canada. So I've read that about half the ducks are, of course, they're ground nesting birds, so half the ducks are destroyed by skunks and foxes. And so when you say you're managing not species specific, I'm interested in the conflict between the people that love small mammals and people that love ducks, but they can just wipe them out if they're out of balance. Is there an effort within, as far as you know, in Canada to be more thoughtful about what species are overrunning the other? And how do you balance the desires of different animal lovers?
Yeah, that's a great question, and we definitely have habitat management plans for our wetlands especially, and also for ground nests in general, where we're working with ranchers, farmers, as well as academic organizations to put different things in place. Sometimes it's fencing, sometimes it's hunting, it depends on the species and the population dynamics of the species in terms of which approach they use, but it's definitely an important aspect of consideration. We're lucky in Canada, of course, with the way our seasons go, that we can also do some things off-season when the birds are gone to install, so we're not disrupting habitat in a way that would limit nesting the following year.
Yes, also on saving dogs for saving frogs. Just maybe a... you brought up the quail population. Is that also a direct correlation with the horned lizard decline in those regions?
I don't know as much about quail as I pretend to know about lizards. I do know that they've declined. There are a bunch of common factors with this sort of loss and fragmentation of habitat, and then issues that affect all ground-dwelling terrestrial vertebrates, namely fire ants and introduced hogs, things like that. So I don't know if they're timed exactly. One of the challenges with sort of understanding the history of like what happened with the Texas horned lizard, it went from everywhere to nowhere, is that it was ubiquitous. Nobody would have ever have imagined that horned lizards would blink out in all these different places. They're just everywhere. And so reporting is terrible, right? We don't document every common species we see. How many grackles did y'all note on your way into the building, right? That's kind of how it was for horned lizards. And so unfortunately, they're so abundant that nobody really tracked that. Quail, I think, is a little different. But suffice to say, even though we've mentioned fire ants several times, there is no single smoking gun for the decline of horned lizards. It's different factors working in combination have had a deleterious effect on them in different places. So obvious issues are, we look out and we see a nice big field. A horned lizard sees a bamboo thicket. It's just that old world blue stem that it doesn't seem like it would be a deal breaker, but it really is. And so these sort of less obvious non-native invasives cause a real problem for them. And other issues like when we saw the decline of the fur industry in Texas in the 1970s, that pretty much corresponded with the rise of large-scale deer hunting and deer feeders across the landscape. So by those two factors created absolute paradise for raccoons, where in many places raccoon populations are orders of magnitude higher than ever documented anywhere in the literature. So the status of these mesocarnivores and their prey is totally out of whack in most of Texas because we like to put corn on the ground.
Good morning. My name is Steve. I'm the founder of Hives for Heroes, which our mission is simply to save bees and save vets. First off, Ryan, I want to thank you for your service. Very much appreciate that, brother. For everybody else on the panel, thank you for the work that y'all are doing. And for Dr. Rachel, on the pollination standpoint of the Canada, US, native pollinators and things of that nature, how could we help, as the largest network of beekeepers in the country right now, how can we help you in your efforts of the pollination aspect?
Well, thank you for that, and thank you for the work you do. I would say I'm a former Navy wife. I'd like to clarify that I'm still the wife. He's just retired Navy. He also came from Saskatchewan, which is strange to think about being in the Navy when you come from Saskatchewan. Really, let's connect, because our job here is to really facilitate connections with organizations like yours to sister organizations, brother organizations in Canada. We have a great collaboration on a number of pollinator initiatives, and I'd love to connect you to folks in Canada that are working on the same issues. You know, there's spaces in which we can work together, whether it's through the agriculture sector, whether it's through space conservation or ranching, that I think are so important. And I know the bee collapse that's happening in North America, I can't underestimate how important that is in terms of our economy and food security for North America. We're having a lot of supply chain issues right now, and I think there's things we can do in pollination to avoid issues in the food sector.
Hi, good morning. Thanks, everyone. This question is for Alexis. You know, my first thought when I was looking at those islands was about climate change and sea level rise, and I know Audubon is very forward on those issues, so I was just wondering how y'all are taking that into account. You know, I'm not a climatologist, but you know, that's what my first thought was when I was looking at this. So if you could share a little bit about that, that'd be great.
Sure, yeah, I'm happy to. And it's definitely something on the forefront of our mind as well, because one of the reasons we need island restoration in places like Matagorda Bay is because some of them have become submerged, or if they're not submerged yet, they're low enough that when there's a high tide event, the birds might already have their nests on the island, but there'll be an overwash event. So one of the sites we've identified for restoration is Gulf Cut Islands. It's a series of 5 small islands, and the birds will nest on them, and our partner, Gulf Coast Bird Observatory, goes out and monitors them all summer. And this year we lost all the nests because the water got high enough that the whole island gets washed over. And so we've been talking a lot about that because with 177 islands we manage, that's not all the islands that birds are nesting on. There's islands outside of our management. So right now we're thinking about how we can prioritize restoration, because when you have all of your islands experiencing the same stressors, we're going to need to start thinking about which birds are using which islands, birds are most threatened, which islands are providing the most benefits to communities. And so we haven't figured out the answer to that question yet, but we're working on it, and we're thinking about doing some modeling and maybe a new project to try to prioritize those for that exact reason. And sometimes it comes down to hardening the shorelines. And so like Chester Island, for example, as we migrated away from the ship channel, we want to add some erosion control structures on the south side so that we can kind of sacrifice the side of the island that's experiencing the most erosion and build out. And there's other islands in Galveston Bay as well where they're already so small. And it's challenging too because some birds prefer very low sandy islands, and oyster catchers are a type of bird that prefers oyster habitat. And so how do we restore those islands and maintain that habitat over the long term? So we'll be thinking about it going forward and hopefully convening some more partners to try to answer that.
Thank you. So we'll wrap up the panel with one last question for each of you. Obviously, from your presentations, you guys are at the forefront of very effective partnerships and collaboration in what you're doing. And I'd like to give you a little bit of a twofold question. One, what is needed for more efficient partnerships moving forward? And two, what is the one thing you want the virtual and live audience to leave thinking about today? So what's needed for efficiency, and what's the one thing that you want them to leave with? And Alexis, we're going to start with you.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, I think one thing that I think we need for efficiency is around timing. And so there's a lot of challenges with conservation in the space we work in with conservation, where we have project needs that don't always align with funding schedules. And so we're applying for funding, or maybe we're working with partners and they have a grant that has deliverables that don't align with the project timeline. So one thing I think is really needed is just to kind of take a step back in some of these projects and focus on the goal of the project and go into it with our partners with that intent to put the work first and not always those deliverables or those timelines. And so it can be a real challenge because everybody's resource limited and everybody's working with different investors, but I think that would be a great benefit. And then the second part of the question was what's needed and
to be thinking about
one thing to be thinking about. Oh yeah, I think the one thing to be thinking about is participation. So whether you work in a community or at a government agency or a nonprofit organization, there's a role for everybody, and we want to work with different people, so show up and participate with us. We'd love to work with you.
In terms of efficiency, I think there's bringing people together. I think the bee question was exactly a great question, an example of that. We have things that are happening across North America right now where we could share best practices and learn from each other and build on each other's successes, but also each other's failures. I think those are really important to think about. In terms of walking away, you know, the involvement and engagement piece is, I think, really important. And I think about the data points that we need to understand what's happening. I don't think we can look back for an indicator of what's happening in the future anymore. I think climate change has completely affected how we're going to assess what's going in the future. And so citizen science, speaking with people with traditional knowledge, speaking with ranchers, that sort of firsthand observations about what's happening. And then we can use models and we can use science, but we can't necessarily depend on the past the way that we have historically in terms of the future of conservation.
Dr. Gluesenkamp.
In terms of efficiency, for us, it's really about economy of scale, and that applies to collaborative networks as well. It seems that as there are more nodes in these networks, you start to make more connections between distant nodes. I talk to my staff about this all the time. We're really seeking to tie all these threads together and make them work for us. And the other about, you know, what do I want people to leave with today? Both of those are addressed by something that we're working on with Texan by Nature. And thank you so much for your support and project management guidance that we're developing an advocacy guide, which a horned lizard advocate is anybody, all of you, I am assuming, anybody, a landowner, a donor, a kid who's doing a school project, someone who saw one on vacation. I don't care why you like horned lizards. We want you in the network. And so we're building up a data set of individuals and organizations so that we could have it all laid out. You know, I felt like as this project has grown and grown and grown, I have a fire hydrant of communication going by, and I could just barely dip a cup in it. And so we're really trying to capture all of that for a few reasons. Number one, because people want it, and we want to give people, you know, something positive in conservation. But also so that, like I said during my talk, we can focus on actually doing that work. So what I want you to leave with today is that any individual can be an advocate. I talk about horned lizards, you know it's my Trojan horse. When I say horned lizards, you can include any native biodiversity you like, but there's so many ways that you can help, even if it's buying a $1 sticker, which I don't have.
I was going to buy that sticker. I think twofold. One, just to echo Alexis, there's a lot of different organizations doing conservation work in Texas, which is fantastic. They're kind of all different sizes. And a lot of times you can have two organizations with joint kind of priorities, but because of the size difference in the companies, it's very difficult for the organizations, it's very difficult for them to work together. We experience that a lot. You know, we have our foundation, which is new and smaller, but Desert Door, which is large and 1,000 miles an hour all the time. So if you do something with Desert Door, it's like, we're gonna go quick, we're gonna go fast. If you do something with the foundation, we have the ability to speak longer over periods of time and to work through problems. But I think there's an opportunity for an organization to kind of sit in the middle of these things and to like advertise or create an opportunity where people can network and connect in the middle, and then they can provide funding or they can provide guidance or open doors for like small organizations, you know, into big organizations, and figure out how to like set the right sort of like battle rhythm, if you will, between the two organizations. I think the other thing is like we have to create a new army of people who are bought into this idea of conservation. So Neil came out, he was wonderful to come out and speak at our Hullabaloo a couple weeks ago, and he said something. I had always known that 98% of the land in Texas was privately owned, but I didn't know it was owned by 200,000 people, I think you told me. That's a problem. in terms of if you want people to be conservationists, it needs to be accessible to them. You need to be able to go and walk and set foot on these 50, 100,000, 200,000 acres and experience what it's like to see nothing and to hear nothing. That's what gets people's hearts. So Desert Door, through our foundation, well, Wild Spirit, Wild Places, I should say, this actually is all Dr. Luby here, but we are creating like a virtual reality experience. We're going to take it into inner city schools and community organizations, and we're going to allow them to experience it. We're also opening the doors of our ranch, we have a ranch, to bring people in. But that requires more ranch owners in Texas to do it. It just absolutely does. Like, you have to create more stewards, and the only way to do it is to make it more accessible. And then the one thing I would like to leave everybody with is, what are some other ways you can make liquor out of plants? No, I'm just kidding. I think if you're thinking about starting a company, starting with this proposition of what can I do with something that nobody else is using is incredibly impactful. That's what I was trying to drive home in my speech, is for us, we took something that nobody wanted, and we've created an entire industry around it. You know, we have over 125 people who get their paychecks from Desert Door now. We're creating an industry out in West Texas, which, unless you own oil out there, you know it's a challenge. So we're creating jobs, we're creating opportunity for people. And like, this is a very big and beautifully bountiful land that the good Lord has given us. Like, we could probably just be a little more creative with how we use it and how we think about it.
Perfect. Please join me in thanking this panel. All right, so next up, we will be breaking for lunch. As you are networking, I'd love to have you think about the learnings from this panel. Pretty universal. Participate, be an advocate, think about how to get involved. We heard that from 4 very different speakers coming at it from a different direction. Go in with intent. That came across loud and clear as well. So go to lunch, enjoy. We'll meet back here at 12:25. So for anyone virtual, we will break until 12:25 and we will kick off our second panel at 12:25. If you do have questions or want to engage virtually, go to our Slack channel or info@texanbynature.org. For those in the room, you'll go out the back doors and to your left, and the lunch will be available. So thank you guys.